My guest is the Western Regional Director for Colorado State University's Extension Program. Beyond the Headlines is brought to you by KSUT Casino. If you're ready to elevate your gaming experience, look no further than KSUT Casino Resort, where the thrill of the game meets the beauty of the Colorado landscape. Indulge in exquisite dining at their diverse restaurants, from casual to classic cuisine. KSUT Casino has every culinary experience covered. Whether you're a gaming enthusiast, a foodie, or just looking for a good time, KSUT Casino Resort has it all. So what are you waiting for? Plan your next getaway and experience the excitement at KSUT Casino Resort. Visit skyutcasino.com for more information. Now to the show.
Our guest might be the most prominent horticulturist in Southwest Colorado. Darrin Parmenter is Western Regional Director for the Colorado State University Extension. He also co-hosts the Garden Guys radio show on KSUT with Tom Bartels. You can hear that Saturdays at noon. Thanks for coming on, Darrin. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's always fun to be on another show.
I also invited my coworker, my colleague, Sadie Smith, because a couple of months ago she got a little crazy and is now a rookie container gardener for the first time this summer. First of all, what does Extension mean to you?
So Extension has a little bit of background on what we do and how we were created. We are attached to every land-grant institution across the United States. Every state has a land-grant institution. Here in Colorado, ours is Colorado State University. The purpose of Extension is just that, to be an extension of the university. So we take that information that's typically derived from research projects and dumb it down, if you will, to the general public. That said, that's what it used to be in the 1800s and up to the 1940s, 50s. Now we just do a lot more in terms of education, outreach, programs, do some research, and then community building. It's a good gig.
Yeah, and you've been at the new gig for, about 4 months?
Yeah, I'm a seasoned pro.
After doing it for the county for a long time.
Yeah, so I did this at the University of Florida for 4 years. Came here to CSU and was here from 2007. So then in 2024, I swapped jobs and put on the administrative hat. And I'm now much more of the desk guy rather than the plant guy, which has been a transition, but thankfully, just like you, Sadie, that I have some container gardens and enough gardens of my own to keep me busy.
Yeah, a lot of people leave work at home.
Yeah, I know.
I want you to explain, lay us out your home garden.
It's always funny, if you think about an architect, it's not uncommon for an architect to live in a really crappy looking home. It's the same with my garden. I spent so much time doing this as my job that I probably neglected my home space. But we're here in town. We have an urban garden. Fortunate enough to have 2 city lots, so we have a fair amount of horticultural variety, I guess, throughout. But in terms of vegetable production, I have 6 beds, and then I like tomatoes and I like peppers. It's that weird masochistic behavior that we all partake in every spring, thinking that we can grow these amazing plants in our really rough climate. So I have, in Alto, I probably have about 30 tomatoes and probably the same number of peppers and garlic and onions and all the leafy material and deer and weeds and, all the challenges that are attached to gardens.
And out of curiosity, gophers? Because my landlord found out I was doing this, and she was like, ask him about gophers. Is that a growing problem in the valley?
You're in the valley?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a notorious problem in the valley. In town, we don't have them.
Okay.
But they like that area. They like the space. They like irrigation. And they truly do like the Bugs Bunny. I don't know if you guys are old enough to remember Bugs Bunny, but there used to be he would suck the carrots down the ground, and pocket gophers do exactly that. They suck plants down. They eat the roots of trees. And they're really hard to control because you can't see them.
I was going to say, how do you? What's the solution?
Have you ever seen Caddyshack? It's pretty much how you try to kill a goat. It's
just blow it to hell.
Yeah. Water, you can flood them out, you can gas them out. There's traps that do a quick kill, snap of the neck. But you got to be on it because they're super active.
So you actually were in a place, you mentioned Florida, where things want to grow. Why would you come back here? Just the challenge, being a pro?
So I was born and raised here. I grew up here. My parents, essentially my dad grew up here, my grandpa grew up here. So we've got some generational stability in the Plata County in the Durango area. So I always wanted to come back home. In high school and early college years, I wanted to leave as fast as I could. Realized I was leaving a really amazing place, and it took a circuitous route which took me through Florida to get back here. And nothing against anything attached to Florida, but I'm not a Floridian, especially South Florida. Just the humidity and the heat, it definitely worked me over. And there, I was a vegetable specialist. There, it's opposite gardening as well as farming. So the season really starts in October and goes to May, as opposed to here, it starts in May, June, and goes through, if you're lucky, it goes through October. So it's a much longer season, but it's the dry season in Florida. If you try and grow vegetables in the middle of summer in South Florida, it's going to be a challenge.
Just too hot.
Too hot, too many insects, too many diseases, too much rain, all those things that are attached to more tropical, unless you're growing totally tropical plants that are accustomed or acclimated to those things. So, yeah, when I had a chance to come back here and take this job, we put the house on the market pretty quickly.
What is it about our climate specifically that makes it so hard? When I have friends and family ask, I basically just say because everything is on the extremes. How is that accurate?
That's totally accurate, yeah. I mean, we're here, and it's been gorgeous. This month of June has been absolutely outrageously nice because we've had a lot of rain. It's been cool these last couple weeks, and that's not typical. So if you think about a vegetable, I'm putting a vegetable either in by seed or a transplant, typically somewhere in the months of May and June. What we have found historically is, let's even describe June out of this, really hot, really dry. So you're putting either a really small plant that has a poor root system into the ground, or you're trying to start something from seed that's also got a really poor root system into the ground. So you're giving it kind of a couple strikes at the very onset of that season. And then we have the extremes, like as you mentioned, Connor, just like really hot during the day, really cold at night. If I was a perfect vegetable, like I would want mid-80s during the day, mid-70s at night. That would be ideal. Here, it's not uncommon in June for us to have mid-90s during the day and then mid-30s or 40s at night. That 40 to 50 degree swing really messes with them. It messes with their growth cycle. And then today, it's July and it's still windy. So having that wind that desiccates the leaves, dries everything out, will drive you crazy. The fact that over the course of the entire year, we get about 19 or 20 inches of precipitation, that's not that much. So we're having all these environmental challenges in typically a season that's about 100 to 120 days. That's a short season. And we're lucky if we get that. Last year, I froze on June 22nd, and I froze on September 23rd. That's essentially the summer solstice to the fall equinox.
So, okay, I'm glad you clarified this for me. Last summer was my first summer growing here. It was an abnormally bad year.
Nope, I'm going to tell you, that's normal. That's kind of like what I tell folks now. Is abnormal's the new normal. Because we are so varied, and however the reason you want to call that, you can call it, but we do have a changing climate. We can debate the reasons behind the changing climate, but our climate is changing. So I would say a year like last year where you probably, did you go through the winter of 2022, 23?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're all jazzed. You're there's so much moisture. So this is going to be such a great growing season. And then it just goes hot and dry. And it kind of stays that way for a while, and it gets really wet towards the end. So that abnormality, to me, is the normalcy. So yeah, it's been gorgeous growing season so far in 2024. That may change very quickly from here on out. I have no idea what's going to happen. But if I get a freeze on the summer solstice, that sucks. That's rare.
Yeah.
I hope, but maybe it's not, and if I don't even get into October, it sucks. So having that short season is really challenging, especially if you're trying to grow tomatoes.
Yeah, so somebody would hear that who's not from here, and they'd say, oh, grow a short season variety. But even that struggles here, right? Because of that intense sun?
Yeah, everything is going to struggle, right? If you try to grow lettuce, either of you grow lettuce? Yeah. So lettuce does great if you can get it in the ground in April. It's a cool season crop. Cool season crops do not like the heat of summer. So as that lettuce, and I have way too much lettuce. I'm going to be eating salads for the rest 6 months. I have no idea. But it's going to get bitter. It's not going to be a very good taste profile because lettuce doesn't like the heat. So now I'm going to say, I'm going to grow that in March and April. Good luck getting lettuce to go to the point where you can make a salad out of it just in March and April. So if you can get that into June, great. Take July and August off, plant again, and then grow on that other shoulder season of the fall, you may have more success.
So I believe we're 6A or 6B. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's a hardiness zone? Sure.
Okay, so
Yeah.
With that, what plants would do well in that climate?
So none of our vegetable crops. Like, the vast majority of our and I think, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong somewhere out there, but if we're 6A, that means what's that's based off of is the average minimum temperature in the winter. Okay, we're not growing vegetables in the winter time. So it can, and I think that temperature is maybe -10 to -15 is not the average lowest of the lows over a course of 30 years. So if it's getting to 15 below every winter, maybe we're zone 6 or 5B or whatever it is. That has nothing to do with vegetables. Like if it gets to 32 degrees, your tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, peppers, potatoes, anything above ground, corn, beans, they're done. They're gone. They're dead. If it gets to 20, your cabbage, your lettuce, your beets, those things are then gone. So the hardiness zone, we're at the Durango Botanic Gardens here at the library. The hardiness zone definitely pertains to these perennial crops, not so much our annual crops like vegetables. So these trees out here, if it gets to 20 below and you have a zone 6B hardy tree, it's gone. But it doesn't really matter as much about vegetables.
With signs and graphics, you can say anything, do anything, be anything. Bright ideas, brilliantly executed, can turn the mundane into the marvelous. Power your business visibility with custom promotional items and high-quality embroidery services from Fast Signs of Durango. Visit us at 67 Settle Street in Bodo Park, online at fastsigns.com, or give us a call, 970-247-8000.
Our guest is Darrin Parmenter. He is the Western Region Director for the CSU Extension. I'm glad you have it on the hat right in front of me. It's a total custom hat.
You wonder why I do that. That's
for the interviewers. With that new role, I should ask, what is the biggest challenge Western growers face now?
Water. That's it. I mean, water is such a commodity. Like, it truly is a commodity. People are buying it based off of a commodity structure where they could then potentially sell it later on for a greater price. So the water in the western part of the state that has the majority of the water, and the eastern part of the state that has the majority of the people, there's a conflict there on whose water gets it, who gets the water, who has first rights to the water, and then where that water goes. So,
and even outside the state, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Even as the Colorado travels south and west, those people have rights to that water. So how we get that water to the people who are supposed to have access to it is definitely a challenge. I don't know, whoever that was, it Mark Twain that once said, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting for, right? Like, that's kind of the deal, is that once you start talking water, it creates a point where people puff up their chest, get defensive, say this is mine. And in a climate where our water, I'm not saying it's decreasing, but it's becoming much more episodic. So instead of us getting 19 or 20 inches across the year of precipitation, we may get 25 inches of precipitation, but it's going to fall in larger events. And with our soil, which is like really clay-based, it has a tough time holding that water. So that water is going to move off it, can't be absorbed, whatever it is.
I'm looking at the map on the CSU Extension website. I would guess the region you're in charge of is the largest in the state?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was the western or the southern.
Yeah, well, and it's freaking big. It's all I know. Like, I go to the Wyoming to the New Mexico state line, and then once you start climbing the mountains, that's where I end. So yeah, I oversee 16 counties in western, it's in the western part of the state. And it's everything from like a Mesa County, which is Grand Junction, which is now urban. It's like a Durango and La Plata County, which is maybe call it peri-urban, whatever you want to call it, to Dolores County, which has maybe 1,500 people in it. San Juan County to the north, that's got 700 people in Silverton. And then the really remote counties in the northwest corner. So it's a really cool differentiation between all the counties, the topography, the people, the politics, all that wonderful stuff that makes Colorado pretty unique.
Yeah. How have you been dealing with just sort of the vastness of your region?
Podcasts, books on tape, and really good playlists that my kids create. That's how I do it. Because I'm on the road a fair amount.
Yeah, this does mean you were in like Grand Junction a lot more often.
Yeah. It means I'm kind of just traveling, and I like that person-to-person contact, which is why I love Extension. When I worked at the Extension office at the fairgrounds, you get people walk in, what is this plant? How can you help me farm? I need some resources on livestock management. I'm not a livestock guy, but I can give you the resources attached to it. Now, I have an office down at the Fort Lewis College Innovation Center. That's great. But my other office is in the basement of my house. So I don't get to see those people, and I tend to be, I'm not a people person, but I love conversation. So for me to go out and travel, it makes that difference of really having those conversations with folks that, if water is the big issue, or if soil type, or if affordability of housing, all those things are stuff that we can dabble in and try to help facilitate.
You talked about your sort of path that brought you back here earlier. Looking at it on paper, I mean, you have your undergrad in horticulture from Montana State, then a master's at Cornell. It would seem like this was your path from a young age. When did you get the bug?
It's funny, I have no idea when I got the bug. Both my grandpas had pretty amazing gardens. My grandpa here in Durango had an amazing one. And then I had a grandpa in Beulah, which is just outside of Pueblo. They had amazing gardens. Maybe there was some seepage from their knowledge that I grabbed, but I wasn't like this teenage kid that was like, oh, I'm going to go garden. No, I wanted to play baseball. I wanted to hang out with my friends. I wanted to drive up and down Main Street 300 times. That's what I wanted to do, right? It wasn't horticulture. And then I got a job at a nursery here in town in the early 90s, and that got me the bug of I really like plants. So I was like, okay, what schools have horticulture? But the other part of that was what schools have really good skiing? And that was Montana State. And so my buddy had a house across the street from Bridger Bowl. That was a bigger decision maker for me than a horticultural degree. Not very many people get a horticulture degree, and I can see why. It's if I'm going in this for money, that's not going to work. And then I wanted to farm. I was like, I want to be a farmer. And then I tried farming, and I was like, there's no way I will ever be a farmer. It is really hard work. It's a really crappy pay, and every year is a straight up gamble. It is no different than going to Las Vegas. Because if it hails, if it rains too much, if it's too hot, if it freezes, those are things that are out of my control. No different than how I spin that little ball in the roulette wheel. That's out of my control. And I wanted to have something in my control. So instead of farming, I thought it would be much better to teach people how to farm. And that's what Extension was all about.
Also, I know we're only 14 episodes in, but you're now the first person to ever drop seepage on the show.
Well, I don't use the word moist. I think we'll be fine.
What's the most common question you get on your radio show?
It's I don't know if we have a common question. Obviously, what is going on with insert whatever this is, right? And so probably the biggest thing that we deal with is what's eating my plant. And what I keep telling people is that I don't know what's eating your plant. I don't see it. But the best way for you to see what's eating your plant is to go out at night with a headlamp, because most of our insects are nocturnal feeders. For me, and we talk about this ad nauseum on the Garden Guys, are pill bugs. They're also called sow bugs, wood lice, wood louse, roly-poly. They're super cute. As a kid, we love them because you can roll them up and then you can throw them. But they are voracious eaters. They're absolutely voracious consumers of our small, tender plants. But they are nocturnal feeders. So if you can figure out what's actually doing it, then you can figure out the control. I'm never going to tell someone how to control something without identifying what it is, because I don't want you to put a chemical in our environment or waste your time and money on something that doesn't make sense. So yeah, the pill bugs and the gophers, that's a good one. We get lots of those questions. And then tomatoes, which is, she's the diva. She wants all the attention in the garden, so she gets a lot of questions attached.
Yeah, you talked about the masochism earlier. And not only is my bed up at soil, mostly tomatoes, I decided to throw a watermelon in there just for a little extra pain.
Just take that knife and you just like turn it a little bit more each time. Good job. I'm proud of you. Now that said, you can grow them both here. You just need a long season.
Okay. So is it almost necessary to have a greenhouse to grow something like an indeterminate tomato here? Okay.
Nope. And actually greenhouses to me are not that desirable. And it's one, I just can't afford them. But two, if we're first week of July, if you find a greenhouse right now, go into it. And you tell me how hot it is. It is not uncommon for greenhouses in the middle of summer to be 125 to 140 degrees.
Wow.
They get hot, really hot. That's what they're supposed to do. So if they're not shaded, it's almost too hot. Tomatoes, doesn't matter if it's indeterminate or determinate, they start aborting flowers at like 90 degrees. So they're going to keep aborting flowers. They'll grow great, but they're never going to fruit. So I'm not all about greenhouses, but I am about season extension, covering crops, row covers, those things that you can do in, April, May, September, October, to give yourself 4 or 5 degrees. And if you can give yourself that 4 or 5 degrees, there's a really good chance that you'll be able to keep that crop a little bit longer.
So I put all of my vegetables in pots and Connor has all of his in the ground. Like, what is your thought on whether it should be kept in a pot? I hear it's more for beginners, or if it should be put in the ground.
I like the idea of container gardening if you have limited space. So if you have a townhouse or an apartment, you just have a back porch, or I have them on my patio. I like them in containers. Now, I've been doing this way longer than you have probably been alive, which is a testament to my age, not your age. I found that certain crops I like to grow in containers. I grow shishito peppers. Small, little, thin-skinned. You can fry them up, just salt and olive oil. It's the best thing you'll ever eat. I only grow those in containers because I like to grow them in containers. And I think that peppers like their roots warmer. Our roots are going to be warmer when they're above ground in a black container or any color container than they will be below ground. So I think those peppers do better above ground. I've never tried to grow them in ground, but I know they grow above ground, and I know I only get one shot at this, so I'm going to do them above ground. Last year I grew tomatoes in containers, and they were absolute trash. They were awful because I think it got too hot. And when it gets too hot, those tomatoes just wilted and they didn't come back. So I was expecting to have to build shade structures this year, cool them down afternoon, getting rid of that afternoon heat and light. I haven't had to do it yet. I still may have to. And so to me, it doesn't matter so much if it's in ground or in a container. It's probably like where they have them, like on the side of what side of your house. So my tomatoes, if I grow them on the east side of my house, they get that afternoon shade, which I like because as we roll into 3, 4, 5 o'clock here, it gets really hot as that sun gets lower in the horizon. And I want to shade my plants from that. So if you can give shade to your plants in the afternoon, that to me is the best thing. It doesn't matter as much as if it's a raised bed or a container.
You want to end the show with a couple more nerdy garden questions?
The other thing I was wondering about is I know different vegetables, they like different acidity within the soil. So I've heard that like some people put coffee grounds to higher the acidity. Like, what's your thoughts on any of that?
Forget about it. Like certain vegetables almost all vegetables will do better when you're below neutral, which is 7.0. So the pH scale goes from 0 to 14. 0 being incredibly acidic, 14 being incredibly alkaline or basic. Our soils around here are alkaline, so they're like 7.5 to 8. Most vegetables like it 7.0 to 6.5. That difference is not going to make or break your season. So I'm never going to do anything to change the pH of my soil, especially if you are doing it in ground. A lot of our soils are so high in calcium that we can pour sulfuric acid on the soil and it'll come back up to its original pH. I'm more interested in microbial activity, adding organic matter, just to increase that microbial activity, good bacterial growth, good fungi growth, getting that soil to drain pretty well, which your containers will do. I don't even care about acidity. I honestly don't, unless I'm at like 8.5, which is really high, or if I'm trying to grow blueberries. Like, the blueberry is a nurseryman's dream because every year it's going to fail, and people are going to go back and keep trying to buy more plants because they don't want to fail. But they got a pH at like... Are they growing in pots? Yeah. Okay. They'll do okay in pots. They just won't overwinter in pots. Right. So we can discuss how you're going to do this offline if you want, but keep your expectations really low. They want pHs around 5.5. We don't have soils with pHs around 5.5. The Northeast does, the Northwest does of the United States. We don't have that. So we don't grow blueberries. We don't grow azaleas. We don't grow rhododendrons. These are the crops that love acidic soil. We don't have them. So I just try to grow what I always figure is like, I grow what my kids like to eat, what we like to eat, and what I know does well. That's it. Those are my 3 parameters. If you like to eat watermelon, man, you should try to grow it. If it doesn't work for 3 years, maybe be like, all right, I'm not going to grow watermelon. I love sweet corn. Man, I can eat a lot of sweet corn, but I don't want to grow it because it takes a lot of water, takes up space, and for every plant, I get maybe 2 ears. That return on investment isn't high enough for me to not be able to just to go to the parking lot and grab a Olathe sweet corn that's grown, 120 miles from here. That's absolutely delicious. So I know that somebody else can grow it better than I can. So it's not really in my best interest to grow that crop here.
And then in your experience, what crops have grown the best here for you?
That's a good question. If I'm going to grow tomatoes and peppers, I want a success rate, right? I want to pat myself on the back. So I'm going to grow smaller fruited crops. I'm not going to grow a big Jim pepper or Anaheim pepper or bell pepper. I'm going to grow a shishito. I'm going to grow a jalapeno. I'm going to grow a corno di toro or a padron. Those are all small fruited crops because the smaller they are, the better success I'll have that they'll actually reach maturity. Tomatoes, I'm going to grow a sun gold tomato. I'm going to grow a Matt's Wild cherry. I'm not going to always grow a big Brandywine tomato because I'm scared that thing is so big, it won't ever reach maturity for me. Any of our cold season crops. So if you like it or not, I can grow the heck out of kale most years. Yeah, like our kids like, oh great, kale again, and again and again. But it's nutrient dense, it's cold season so it likes our cold nights. And to me, it's easy to grow here. I can grow it in through November. And it's still going to be okay coming out. I can grow carrots really well. A lot of folks can, but I cannot grow beets to save my life. Like my beets every year suck. So I've stopped growing them. And my Beth was like, we're done. We are done with beets. And I'm like, all right, I love beets, but she can't really grow them that well. So I just took that off the palette. So the cold season crops, lettuce, greens, Swiss chard, snap peas, those things can do well in our environment.
And then I know you said you don't like to mess with the acidity of the soil, but you do, I think you said you add organic matter. Do you need, what do you do towards fertilizing your plants?
I don't fertilize. No. And you can. The plant's going to tell me that. If it needs nitrogen, it's going to look yellowish. So that plant's going to dictate that to me. I'm not going to tell that plant what it needs. I'm also not going to force feed plants more and more fertilizer because then they just keep looking up at me for their nutrition as opposed to going to the soil for the nutrition. So every year, our native soil is it's high in nutrient matter. So just using our native soil typically has got everything that plant needs. And then every fall, I just add 2 to 3 inches of leaf material to my beds. Let it sit over the wintertime. I let that snow break it down, let the cold break it down, and then incorporate that in the spring. So that's my organic matter. That's really all I do. And I should say, with tomatoes, I occasionally add a chicken-based organic fertilizer if I grow tomatoes in the same place every year, because tomatoes will pull a fair amount of nitrogen out of the soil. And last year, my tomatoes started to look peaked, so I just scratched in chicken fertilizer this spring. They seem to do fine. And I'm not going to press it, and I'm not going to push it, and I'm not going to just feed them just to feed them.
You mentioned your wife and kids. Do you keep this venture in the family? Do they like getting out in the garden, or can you not see control?
Oh, well, so, I mean, I got 3 teenagers and a daughter who's 21 in 2 days. The daughter who's 21 in 2 days, she's starting to see the light. But a teenager, they could care less. Like, I mean, maybe they do. Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. They like to eat it, but I've never been like, oh, Dad, can I go out and weed with you? Or, hey, let's prune the tomatoes together today. Let's have a bonding. No, that doesn't happen in our house. My wife, Beth, yeah, she grows the heck out of strawberries. She's the flower person in the family. And I mean, the flowers, you know, at an emotional and mental level are amazing to have, because they bring us joy, and they come in the house as a cut flower, and they bring us happiness, right? That's a great thing. But they also attract the pollinators. So they attract the mason bees, the carpenter bees, the bumblebees, the hoverflies, the butterflies, all those things that pollinate my vegetable crops. So I want those in the garden. And they also eat the aphids, and they eat, you know, some of the thrips. And so they're good in my garden. So having that combination of flowering plants and then the veggie crops, to me, is what I always strive to have.
Darrin, thanks so much for coming on. Congrats on the new job, and
Thank you,
maybe
guys.
we'll have you back on so I can cry about my tomatoes in the fall.
We'll have a therapy session.
Excellent.
Thank you, guys.
You know that sound. It's the bells of victory, the thrill of the win. It's the sound of your jackpot hitting. And it's happening every day at KSUT Casino Resort. With the best odds in Colorado and some of our biggest promos of the year running right now. KSUT is Southern Colorado's winning destination. Get in on the action. Get in on the fortune. Only at KSUT Casino Resort. Visit SkyUtCasino.com for the latest promotions.
Thanks to KSUT Casino Resort for supporting the podcast. Music written by Alexander Nakarada. I'm Connor Shreve, and I hope you join us next time on Beyond the Headlines 2 weeks from now.